A very good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and a very warm welcome to our marquee initiative, CNBC TV 18 Digital India Vision 8.0 in partnership with Google Workspace. Our theme this year, ladies and gentlemen, is Decade of the Youths. And we have amongst us on the panel, Karthik Reddy, co-founder and managing partner, Blume VC.
Gentlemen, thank you very much for joining in today. I'm Reema Tendulkar. Karthik, why don't you come in, right? I think right now we're just covering the ambit of diagnosis, but there is so much more in healthcare startups. There is predictive healthcare. You've got robots assisting actual doctors in their surgeries. So how do you see the healthcare startup in India, the challenges, the opportunities?
It's great. The sectors that you're representing today on stage are just two of the many. So from a venture perspective, we're a generalist tech fund. Our history is that we started 13 years ago as a $20 million fund. Come a long way. Now we manage about $600 million. And we've consistently stuck to one thing that we know best, which is to find opportunities at seed stage, right? So we come in really early. So the idea is to be ahead of the curve, to try and see what entrepreneurs are building and try to really be sort of at the beginning and the forefront of like transformative stuff. So within healthcare and AI and agri itself, Blume would have, for example, a Healthify or an Ultrahuman, which are trying to pick up data from consumer behavior and try to be more predictive on health, which you can try and get people into the gym all day long, but essentially if you're not using that data or if you're not capturing that data, there is much lesser motivation for that consumer to try and improve their health. So we're beginning to see those kind of models. Of course, diagnosis, you're seeing two great examples of what the Indian ecosystem has thrown out. We're also seeing, within diagnosis, we have a company like Tricog, for example, which actually does that for ECG readings, like how they do it for blood samples and lung cancer. And within agri as well, I think, the fascinating part about applications of AI are they've been around for 10 years, like our friend from Google just said. And they've been applied to more data models and to, images which have been very, very specific to these kind of applications. So we have a robotics play called Nico, which actually looks for weeds and helps in spraying. And it's entirely done by actually cameras mounted on the back of a tractor. So the number of applications just keeps proliferating. I think the challenge and the opportunity from an Indian perspective is how can you deliver that innovation at a price point that is more relevant to either the US, and then you can build an American-facing company sitting out of India, and there's a lot of money in that. Or can you build something at a cost point that an Indian farmer can use and an Indian ECG administrator can use? And can we build, amazing models that can go to the third world, which arguably from a scale perspective is much bigger than the first world. And I think that is the India opportunity in AI, and doubly so in these two areas, which affect everybody every day, agri and healthcare.
The idea of selecting these two sectors, healthcare and agriculture, is because here every innovation can have a very deep impact. Karthik, come in on, funding these agri-tech startups, right? One would think it's complex in a way that your models are based on probability rather than deterministic models. You're subject to the vagaries of climate. Like 1 degree change in the temperature can affect the crop yield substantially. There are flash floods taking place. So when you have to invest in agricultural startups, how do you go about it? And what do you think about the scalability of the sector to achieve it on a pan-India scale or at a global scale? The processes, the products?
So in India, I feel like opportunity sets fall into two buckets. One, which is essentially you go and build supply chains, or you build technology which sits on top of the aggregate value chain today. One scales beautifully because it doesn't necessarily rely on all the vagaries of what you just said at the ground level, which OTP has to worry about. Whereas if you take a crop in, they're essentially building technology which is like sort of geography neutral in that sense and can become a global sort of monitoring system. So when we look at opportunities, we see whether there is enough value in the technology that end customers will pay for, whether that's corporates, governments, farmers. Farmers are the toughest to get anything out of. But you have to sit in the middle of that value chain if you're in an operational business, like he does in OTP. And that's how I would evaluate anything which is operational on the ground in India, versus a technology play looks very seductive because it's cool technology, but will anyone pay the actual value for it? Clearly, Krishna has shown that people do pay. And so we will usually try to bracket into these two sort of halves of how we look at agriculture as an opportunity set. But it's not easy. At seed, you don't know these answers. And as most people in the audience or on the stage know, failure rates in startups are high because that discovery is what we fund, right? So you essentially might have a technology, but might not be something that's paid for. And so the common jargon is there a product market fit? Product market fit is not whether your product wasn't great or not, whether someone's willing to pay the right price for it or not. And eventually that's where most startups slip and fail or become very subscale and becomes inefficient. But, as I said, if you take something as simple as crops, weeding, and what is a substitute product? It's a migrant labor pool which moves from cotton farm to cotton farm in Maharashtra, Andhra Pradesh, Gujarat, Madhya Pradesh. So that cost is very, very measurable. The farmer's not going to pay 1 rupee additionally for any cool technology that you provide, right? In fact, it has to be more efficient at the same cost or lower cost for the efficiency that you're delivering. And essentially, the advantage that India has over most global providers, like if you go to an Israeli company or an American company, is we can deliver that technology at probably half to 1/5 the cost. And I think in that sense, we're just on the cusp of seeing the first sort of global players in health and agri, which historically was only seen as the realm of SaaS and software because it didn't require hardware and operational sort of cross-border migration. I think we're going to start seeing that. We're going to start seeing deep tech companies which become global, can become public, can become $1 billion of value. But we haven't even seen the first. So I am jumping the gun. But
are you skeptical?
No, I'm optimistic because I have enough in my portfolio which are headed that way. And with a gray orange which automates warehouses in the US, Carbon Clean which captures, carbon and is seen as one of UK's best innovators today because we exported the company to the UK. So the UK has claimed ownership of that, right? But they were all Indian companies, right? And just because they're domiciled in Delaware or the UK does not mean they're Indian companies.
So the promise of this decade is that Indian startups are going to go global. Up until now, it's been the realm of only SaaS companies.
Correct.
In the 90s, it was outsourcing companies. The early 2000s has been about SaaS. Yeah. But you're saying in the next decade, it's going to be these deep tech startups.
I'm just sticking to these two areas. There are a lot more. We're seeing in manufacturing, we're beginning to see orders come in from Israel and the US for a sort of 5-axis machining company in India, which we have in Bangalore. So it's beginning to happen in other areas as well. I'm very optimistic about this. No, I think the challenge continues to be, I think the power of generative AI is to, yes, you're right, it is expensive today. The key is going to be, can we use these models to be able to actually cut down the cost to a point where they become applicable to use cases of this nature, daily use cases, right? And if it's an agri, it's all our supply chains can be better, right? And I think we're going to be a more resource-starved, relatively speaking, or resource-constrained economy in terms of what efficiencies you want to drive. And that I don't think you can fix manually, right, anymore. So what we've done with milk production in this country is one marvel, but can we replicate that for every crop in this country? Can we become the forefront of, sort of getting enough forest cover, plant cover, such that we are actually contributing to be net carbon positive, in that sense, net carbon negative in that sense. All of this is going to be driven, I think, by how we measure things through AI. And it's inevitable that we'll have to build our own stack. We can't rely on the West giving us models on these. And so that's what I foresee, at least in agri per se. And in healthcare, I feel, there's personalized medicine or personalized treatment is essentially the future. And again, it's not a human, it's not something that a human mind can solve. And we'll have to feed more and more data, even if it's, of course, it has to be anonymized, but into these models to be able to generate better sort of prescriptions for how we treat people. Otherwise, we again can't scale this to 1.4 billion people effectively. And I think you can't get healthcare out, high-quality healthcare out to every corner of this country or the world without solving for that. So I think directionally, these are the two things I would want AI to solve for these two industries at least.
Well, with a phone in everyone's hand and a device, we are getting deeper, smarter insights into our body, which will help with personalized medication.
Thank you to all the panelists for sharing your views. It was really interesting to see panelists from diverse fields come together and share the view on powering India's tech age.